Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Couchbase CEO, Bob Wiederhold.
Welcome everybody to Couchbase Connect 2014. It's great to see everybody here today. You know, I've been blown away by the reception that we've seen to the conference this year. More than 1,500 people registered. That's more than 5 times the number of people that attended the conference just a year ago. So thank you for being here today. It's hard for me to believe that it's already been 4 years since Couchbase started on its NoSQL journey. And wow, have we come a long way since those early days. From a small, unknown startup of just 7 people when I joined the company in 2010, to one that's universally recognized as one of the leaders in the NoSQL industry. And more important, to one that is helping hundreds of enterprises around the world power their mission-critical applications at scale. I couldn't be more thrilled to see so many of our early customers here today. There are teams of people here from Zynga and Apple and Concur, just to name a few. Obviously, I'm equally thrilled to see so many of our more recent customers here today. There are teams of people here from eBay, PayPal, from Walmart, from Amadeus, and from Beats Music, just to name a few more. I want to thank you all for being such an important part of the Couchbase community and for being so critical to the meteoric rise and success that Couchbase has experienced over the past few years. Thank you all. Thank you. Now, whether you've been using Couchbase for 4 years or 2 years, or you're just beginning to explore the use of Couchbase, we think of this as a journey that we're taking together with you. We think of this as a series of small and big bets that we're making with you. You, in terms of the small and big bets that you're making, in terms of the investment you've made in your personal careers in learning NoSQL and Couchbase, and from your company's perspective in terms of your adoption of NoSQL and Couchbase. And Couchbase, in terms of the small and big bets that we're making to continue to innovate and be at the forefront of NoSQL technology and the forefront of the NoSQL industry. We're making these small and big bets to make sure that you're successful and that your small and big bets are good ones. And that's really what this conference is all about, helping you to be more successful in your use of Couchbase. Over the next 2 days, there's more than 50 sessions, some being given by Couchbase users and customers, others by Couchbase engineers, all focused on helping you to be more successful with the product and making sure that those small and big bets that you're making on it are good ones. Now, the theme of the presentation that I'm making this afternoon is the NoSQL journey, past, present, and future. The first thing that I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how we've seen NoSQL adopted in the industry to date, and probably more important, how we see NoSQL adopted in the future. And then I'll talk about some of the big bets that we're making in order to deliver innovative solutions to you and to make sure that we stay on the forefront of the NoSQL industry. So let's get started. And we really see the adoption of NoSQL as happening in 3 overlapping phases. Phase 1 started in 2007 or 2008 when the first NoSQL products became available, about 3 years actually before Couchbase even started. The first phase of adoption was really about grassroots developer adoption, as is often the case with open source technologies. Developers, literally or figuratively, went home one weekend, downloaded the software, installed it, started to use it, liked it, and brought it into their companies, where they experimented with it some more, and then generally used it under fairly lightweight applications. Sure, Couchbase had some early customers that used it under mission-critical apps, as did other vendors, but the vast majority of the usage was really under relatively lightweight applications. And as a result, the criteria for success during phase 1 was really focused around ease of development and the richness of a development environment. Not surprisingly, MongoDB, which really focused on ease of development and the richness of the development environment, was particularly successful during phase 1. Certainly Couchbase was also successful during phase 1, but where the Couchbase product really took off is in phase 2. Phase 2 is started in early 2013 from our perspective, and really is all about enterprise adoption of NoSQL and Couchbase under mission-critical applications. Based on the grassroots developer experience that they experienced within the enterprise, enterprises increasingly came to the conclusion that NoSQL was ready for prime time, that it was feature-rich enough, that it was stable enough and reliable enough that you could now deploy under mission-critical and business-critical applications. One of the big changes in phase 2 is that we now saw in increasing numbers big strategic evaluations taking place, where enterprises would put products through the paces, would stress test products from a scalability perspective and a performance perspective before they picked a winner and ultimately deployed under these mission-critical applications. The criteria for success dramatically changed as well. Scalability and performance were now critical because most of the mission-critical, business-critical applications that are out there are already operating at scale, have big global audiences, and therefore performance is really critical. And so now scalability and performance became absolutely paramount, and that's a big reason why Couchbase has been so wildly successful in this second phase of NoSQL adoption. Scalability and performance have been the hallmarks of the Couchbase technology. So let's take a look at a couple of customers, Viber and eBay, PayPal, and let's look at a couple of videos on their experience in selecting and deploying Couchbase under mission-critical applications. The first one is Viber. Viber, who, for those of you who may not know them, is an over-the-top messaging service like WeChat and WhatsApp. They have over 100 million monthly active users and more than 500 million registered users. So this is clearly a mission-critical app that needs to operate at scale and provide very high performance. Let's take a listen to what Viber has to say.
What drives Viber is basically the backend, of course. We had to make a backend which was able to deliver these billions of messages, talking minutes, at sub-second low latencies for hundreds of millions of users. We had our MongoDB cluster over there, and we also used another NoSQL database called Redis, which is an in-memory database. But as we grew, we found that MongoDB couldn't hold the throughput that we needed. Of course, it did have its problems, obviously. First was the MongoDB performance. As I said before, MongoDB was able to provide us more or less tens of thousands of operations per second. And our requirements were in hundreds of thousands, even close to 1 million operations per second is what we have today. Another thing is that MongoDB didn't scale well with many application servers. That's why we had a few problems and looked for a new third-generation database architecture. We did a rather extensive evaluation of many NoSQL technologies and checked which was the best for our use case, and worked with all of the requirements that we put here. And as you can probably guess, we chose Couchbase. This is the third-generation architecture. In the second-generation database architecture, we basically had our MongoDB, which had 150 servers. Redis, we had over 100 servers. Over 250 servers, close to 300 even, that we have today, or had until recently. And in the third-generation architecture, with Couchbase, we basically divided it up to 6 different Couchbase clusters, up to 50 nodes. The total number of servers that we need to replace the second-generation architecture is between 100 and 120 servers. Now, if you do the math, you can see that with less than half of the servers, we're able to do increased performance and get much better and scalable architecture.
Viber's been a great customer of ours and obviously is operating at significant scale and performance. Another key customer is eBay PayPal. PayPal is using us for their ad platform, among many other things. Let's take a listen at what PayPal had to say about their requirements.
You know, the big question which we get asked is, why Couchbase? Why are you going with Couchbase? I mean, several distinct reasons, just enumerating a few of them. Data volume, data access, and then on the availability and scalability, how do we come out with systems which can basically be resilient to failures? Couchbase really helps us in all those scenarios as we started looking at a whole bunch of different things in this ecosystem. So we have a whole business called the PayPal Media Network business, which basically is a very niche, mobile, hyper-local, geo-fenced ad network. Now let me turn my eyes towards the actual usage of Couchbase in the ad tech stack. To zoom into the ad backend itself, that's where we are leveraging Couchbase in a big way, where Couchbase is providing us not only a distributed cache, but also our persistence layer, where we power that back from Couchbase into Elasticsearch for being our information retrieval and our indexed structure. So we leverage both those systems at the back end to really scale our platform to provide relevance and redemption capabilities. And at the bottom really is our data collection infrastructure with Hadoop, MapReduce, and then MySQL in some cases with Tapestry for our reporting portal.
So one other quick comment I'll make about Phase 2 is that, again, Phase 2 is about deploying NoSQL under mission-critical applications. And since most of those mission-critical applications have been around for a while, for 5 years, 10 years or more, most of them are currently running on legacy relational databases. So whereas in Phase 1, we saw a lot of greenfield development, a lot of new applications using NoSQL, Phase 2, from our perspective, has been very much about replacing legacy relational databases from Oracle, from IBM, from Microsoft, et cetera. So that's been a big part of the Phase 2 adoption of NoSQL. Now that's Phase 2, and that's the current phase that we see that the industry is in. What's the next phase? Phase 3, we think, is going to be about enterprises really doing broad replatforming and very broad deployment of NoSQL. Based on their experience in using NoSQL under mission-critical applications in Phase 2, and based on their experience in working with vendors and getting comfortable with the engagement models that vendors have for supporting these critical applications, and based on other things like ecosystem development, we believe that enterprises are going to start to do very broad replatforming and very broad deployments of NoSQL. We're already talking about it with a handful of our best customers, our biggest customers, about doing exactly that. And we generally see that we're going to start to see a significant increase in companies doing that starting in 2015. We think that's going to be another big inflection point in the growth of the industry and obviously the use of NoSQL technology as an alternative to relational databases. Now, as we look at how enterprises are adopting NoSQL in Phase 2, and as we anticipate how they're going to do replatforming and broader deployment of NoSQL in Phase 3, we think it's critically important for Couchbase to make big investments at 3 levels. First, we think it's very important that we continue to improve and enhance the architecture of the system. We think that's fundamental to building a great database management system. Second, we think it's, of course, very important for us to continue to invest in delivering the hundreds of features that you need in order to be successful with the product and to have a great and complete product. And third, we think we need to make big investments, big bets on finding opportunities where we can do major innovations so that we continue to stay at the forefront of the NoSQL industry. Now, in a few minutes, Ravi Mayaram, our Senior VP of Engineering and Products, is going to join me on stage, and he's going to talk about our 3.0 release. He's going to talk about those first 2 levels. We've made some big architectural improvements in the release and that we think is so critical, and he's going to describe those. And he's also going to talk about a few of the more than 200 features that are in that release. But before I bring Ravi on stage, I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about some of the big bets that we've made over the past 18 to 24 months on some big innovations that have just recently come into the Couchbase product or will come into the Couchbase product over the next few months. The first 2 that I'd like to talk about is query and storage. We've made a big investment in query in building a next-generation query language that we call Nickel. Nickel is a complete query language for document databases that is a superset of SQL. And so Nickel is, if you're using Couchbase today for very demanding key value use cases, session state storage, for example, you'll of course be able to continue to use Couchbase for those kinds of key value use cases and expect the same kind of scalability and performance advantages that you have today. But with Nickel, if you want to develop applications that require query and joins and filtering and aggregations and reporting and other kinds of data access, Nickel will provide you with the capability to do that far more easily and provide a very rich language and very rich query capability to build those kinds of applications. We've made a huge investment in Nickel. We are currently in Developer Preview 3. We'll shortly be in Developer Preview 4, and you can expect Nickel and our query capability to make its way into both Couchbase Server as well as Couchbase Mobile over the next few months. We have a number of sessions today and tomorrow on Nickel. There's some by Couchbase engineers. There's one by one of our partners, Simba Technologies, who will talk about JDBC and ODBC. And we have a really interesting presentation from a UC San Diego professor, Professor Yannis Papakonstantinou. I hope I got that name quasi-close. Yannis has done some really interesting research on unifying query languages across big data, Hadoop, and NoSQL. And I think you'll find his insight and some of his conclusions really interesting. He's a big fan of Nickel. He thinks it's at the very leading edge of query languages, and I think you'll find what he has to say very interesting. So that's one big investment in an area of major innovation for us. A second key area is storage, another critical component of any database management system. Like a lot of enabling technologies, storage engines are challenged by the realities of big data. Obviously, we are amassing more and more data, and storage engines have to be able to quickly store and retrieve information from spinning disks and from SSDs in these ever-expanding data sets. Google and Facebook certainly recognized the challenges in storage engines and have invested a lot, for example, in developing LevelDB and RocksDB respectively. Nonetheless, we really saw some big opportunities for innovation in this space. We've had a team working on this for the past 18 months on a project that we call ForestDB.